Hey ChatGPT, what is fornication? Please reply in 30 seconds.
Quran, Surah Al-Isra, 1732. And do not approach unlawful sexual intercourse. Indeed, it is ever an immorality and is evil as a way. This verse emphasizes the prohibition of engaging in sexual relations outside of lawful marriage, highlighting the moral and ethical stance against such actions. Cleophee, fornication refers to sexual intercourse between individuals who are not married to each other. It is often considered a moral or religious issue, with varying views across cultures and societies. In many contexts, it is associated with the concept of premarital sex.
All right, and what is incest? Please reply in 30 seconds.
Cleophee, incest refers to sexual relations between close relatives, such as siblings, parents and children, or other family members. It is generally considered taboo and is illegal in many cultures due to concerns about morality, genetic defects in offspring, and the potential for abuse. Different societies have varying laws and definitions regarding incest, but it is widely condemned across many cultures and religions.
Thanks, ChatGPT. Please list incest from Quran or Islamic literature and Hadith. Please reply in 40 seconds.
Cleophee, in Islamic literature, particularly the Quran and Hadith, incestuous relationships are strictly prohibited. Quranic references. Surah An-Nur 24:2 discusses punishments for unlawful sexual relations, emphasizing the need for moral conduct. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:221 advises against marrying those outside the faith, indirectly supporting familial integrity. Prohibited relationships, derived from Islamic jurisprudence. Mother and son, father and daughter, siblings, brother and sister, aunt and nephew, uncle and niece, grandparents and grandchildren. Hadith. Various hadiths reinforce these prohibitions, emphasizing the importance of maintaining family honor and morality. These teachings collectively uphold the integrity of family relationships in Islam.
Thanks again, ChatGPT. Now, please list incest from the Bible. Please reply in 40 seconds.
Cleophee, here are some examples of incestuous relationships mentioned in the Bible, along with relevant prohibitions that you might find interesting. Prohibitions in the law. In Leviticus 18, you'll find a list of prohibited sexual relationships, which includes mother and son, 18:7, father and daughter, 18:7, siblings, brother and sister, 18:9, aunt and nephew, 18:12-14. Daughter-in-law and father-in-law, 18:15. Brother and sister-in-law, 18:16. Deuteronomy 27 verses 20-23 also reiterates these prohibitions, declaring curses upon those who engage in such relationships. Examples of incestuous relationships. One notable example is Lot and his daughters, where, after fleeing Sodom, Lot's daughters got him drunk and had relations with him. Genesis 19 verses 30-38. Then there's Amnon and Tamar. Timon, the son of King David, raped his half-sister Tamar. 2 Samuel 13 verses 1-14. Absalom and Tamar. Absalom, who was Tamar's full brother, avenged her by killing Amnon. 2 Samuel 13 verses 22-29. Another example is Reuben and Bilhah, where Reuben slept with Bilhah, his father's concubine. Genesis 35 verse 22. Though not typical incest, David and Bathsheba had an affair that led to severe consequences and turmoil in David's family. 2 Samuel 11.
Hey, everyone. I think many of us are tired of the propaganda against Islam. It's important for us to seek the truth ourselves. In today's world, ChatGPT is a fantastic resource that's available for free. Instead of relying on media news, consider using ChatGPT to find the facts. Let's take the initiative to educate ourselves. Let's see what Jack and Wilson are going to say about this subject. Hey everyone, before we get started, I noticed in my YouTube channel analytics that many of you watching aren't subscribed. If you could do me a big favor and hit that subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. It motivates me and helps the channel grow, so I can create more videos like the one you're about to see. Also, as some of you requested, my team has launched a website where you can read my books and find transcripts of all my videos in the form of small booklets. The link is in video description. We're working hard to produce informative videos daily, along with books and transcripts. I'd love your help in spreading dawah, calling to Allah's message. Please click the join button to show your support. Now, let's dive in.
All right, diving in again today. We're going to tackle something kind of sensitive, but definitely something that'll get us thinking. Fornication and incest.
Yeah.
And we'll be looking at them through the Quran and the Bible.
Yeah, it should be a really interesting comparison, don't you think? I mean, these two texts have had such a massive impact on so many cultures, right? And their views on these topics can really tell us so much about their different approaches to morality and family.
Absolutely, yeah. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of each text, I think we got to make sure, that we're all on the same page. When it comes to fornication and incest, I mean, just defining what we're talking about here, I actually took a look at how ChatGPT defines these terms. And basically, fornication is sexual activity between people who aren't married.
Right.
And then incest is, sexual activity between close family members.
Yeah.
It's just to set the stage.
Yeah, those are good working definitions for sure. And it's key to remember that both these topics, they carry a lot of weight, right? Like moral, religious, even legal implications. Different societies throughout history have had, very different views on what's okay and what's totally not.
For sure.
Yeah.
And, what we're doing here is just laying it all out, what each text says, without, taking sides or judging or anything like that.
Right, sticking to the facts as they're presented in the source material.
Exactly. So let's kick things off with the Quran. And you actually found some pretty interesting verses from the Quran that we can dive into. One of them from Surah An-Nur, chapter 24, verse 2. It talks about the importance of, moral conduct, especially when it comes to relationships.
Yeah, and this verse, it really stresses the whole avoiding unlawful sexual relations thing as part of a larger message about building a just and moral society.
Right, makes sense. Then there's another verse you highlighted from Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 221, which, while it advises against marrying outside of the faith, it also indirectly reinforces that idea of preserving, the family unit.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that while the Quran itself might not explicitly lay out every single prohibited relationship, Islamic jurisprudence, which is basically the legal and ethical interpretations of Islamic scholars, has derived a pretty clear list based on the Quran and the Hadiths, the sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad.
Gotcha. So this list derived from Islamic jurisprudence, this would be like the detailed breakdown of what's considered incestuous.
Precisely. It covers stuff like mother and son, father and daughter, siblings, aunt and nephew, uncle and niece, and grandparents and grandchildren. It's all about maintaining those crucial family bonds and making sure there are clear boundaries within the family structure.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it makes sense that these types of relationships would be seen as, taboo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And harmful to the kind of the whole social fabric. Now, switching gears to the Bible, it seems to tackle incest from, two totally different angles. On one hand, it clearly forbids it.
Right.
But then on the other, we get these really powerful stories where, incest actually happens.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
That's what makes studying the Bible so fascinating. You get this blend of, law-giving and storytelling. It's not just about, laying down rules. It's also about exploring, the messiness of human behavior and the consequences that come from breaking those rules.
Yeah, for sure. The story of Lot and his daughters from Genesis chapter 19, verses 30 to 38.
Mm-hmm.
After Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed, Lot's daughters, they get him drunk and they end up having children by him. Talk about a messed up situation, right?
Yeah. Oh, it definitely raises a whole bunch of questions. How much can we even judge their actions? Considering, the totally crazy circumstances they were dealing with. Were they just desperate to, preserve their lineage? Or was there something, more going on? It's a story that's been interpreted, in so many different ways over the centuries.
Yeah, it really gets you thinking about, survival.
Yeah.
And consent in those kinds of extreme situations. Then there's the story of Amnon and Tamar in 2 Samuel chapter 13. Amnon, who is King David's son, rapes his half-sister Tamar.
Right, and that story is all about the abuse of power and the just totally devastating impact of, sexual violence within a family. It's not just a personal tragedy either. It ripples out and affects, the whole family dynamic.
And talking about family dynamics, Tamar's full brother, Absalom, he ends up, getting revenge on Amnon.
Right.
It's described in 2 Samuel chapter 13, verses 22 to 29. And it adds this whole other layer of complexity showing how these acts can lead to, cycles of violence and retribution within a family.
Right. Absolutely, yeah. It underscores, the destructive consequences of these transgressions and how they can just tear families apart. And, these aren't the only instances in the Bible that touch on forbidden relationships. We've also got Reuben and Bilhah from Genesis chapter 35, verse 22.
Right.
He sleeps with his father's concubine, which, while not technically incest, was definitely a major violation of, well, social and familial boundaries.
Right. Yeah. It's like the Bible keeps coming back to this theme of, forbidden desire and the chaos that can come from it. And then there's the famous story of David and Bathsheba, that in Samuel chapter 11, where David commits adultery with Bathsheba and then tries to cover the whole thing up. Lots of intrigue there, betrayal, and ultimately, severe consequences for everyone involved.
Yeah.
It seems like the Bible isn't shying away from showing us the messy reality of human relationships, even when they involve powerful figures like kings.
You're absolutely right. These stories, they aren't just some abstract moral lessons. They're grounded in the realities of, human experience, and they serve as like cautionary tales about what can happen when people just give in to, their baser instincts.
Yeah, for sure. But it's important to remember that alongside these, narratives, the Bible also lays out pretty clear prohibitions against incest.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
You pointed to a couple of places where it gets, very specific about what's off limits.
Mm-hmm.
Leviticus chapter 18, verses 6 to 18, and Deuteronomy chapter 27, verses 20 to 23, both list those prohibited relationships.
Yes.
Including, parents, siblings, even in-laws.
The Bible is crystal clear on this point. These relationships are sacred, and violating them is, a serious offense. It's about maintaining the order and sanctity of the family structure.
Right. It's fascinating how the Bible presents these very clear-cut rules, and yet at the same time, it also includes these stories where, those rules are broken. I mean, you get to see, like, the fallout. I mean, it's not like these stories are hidden away or anything. They're right there in the text.
Right.
For everyone to, read and wrestle with.
Exactly. And that's what makes it such a rich and complex text to explore. It's not just about giving us a set of rules. It's about engaging with the human condition in all its, messiness and contradictions.
I'm curious, though, given that these texts were written in such different times and places, do you think their views on fornication and incest might have, evolved at all?
Yeah.
Like the Bible itself seems to acknowledge that in the earliest generations, things might have been a bit different because of the limited number of people, on Earth.
That's a really interesting question.
Right.
And one that scholars have debated for centuries.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to save that discussion for part 2 of this deep dive. So we've been kind of digging into how the Quran and the Bible, approach these ideas of fornication and incest. And it's pretty clear both of them see it as serious stuff. But these texts, they're ancient. Do you think their views, might have shifted a bit over time, given, like, how much the world's changed? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's true. The world back then, when these texts were, first written, it was totally different from our world today. But I actually think that's what makes studying them so, so fascinating, right? They give us this glimpse into, like, totally different ways of thinking about, morality and family. And they can still kind of challenge us to, examine our own assumptions about these things.
What I find really interesting is that even within the Bible itself, there are these hints. Like maybe things weren't always so like black and white. For example, those early chapters of Genesis with Adam and Eve and their kids, you get this sense that maybe those first few generations, they didn't really have much choice when it came to, finding partners.
Right, right. The whole idea of like a limited gene pool, back in the very beginning of humanity, it's something that, theologians and scholars, they've been talking about it for, ages, really.
Yeah.
It brings up some pretty big questions about how these ancient texts, how they deal with the idea of evolving social norms, and how our understanding of what's right and wrong, how that might change over time.
Okay, so maybe there's some room for nuance then within the texts themselves. But taking a step back for a second, how do these ancient perspectives on fornication and incest, how do they hold up in modern society? I mean, our world is so different now, right? With different values, different understandings of things like, genetics and psychology.
Yeah, it's a big question for sure. On the one hand, we're living in a much more secular society these days where individual freedom and personal choice, they're highly valued.
Yeah.
The idea of these, ancient religious texts kind of dictating our relationships, it might seem a bit outdated to some people.
Right. I can see that. I mean, we've seen huge changes in how people view things like premarital sex, LGBTQ relationships, even the whole concept of family itself, things that were once like totally taboo are now, widely accepted in a lot of parts of the world.
Exactly. So it's tempting to just say, okay, these ancient texts, they're irrelevant now to how we understand relationships. But then again, there are certain like fundamental principles within these texts that still resonate with people across different cultures and religions.
Like what, for example?
Well, like the whole idea of respecting family boundaries, protecting, the vulnerable, and avoiding relationships that could cause harm. These seem like, pretty universal values, even if we, might disagree on the specifics of how they're applied.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are we supposed to just like dismiss these ancient texts as irrelevant? Or can we still learn something from them, even if we don't agree with, every single word?
That's where I think it gets really, really interesting. For me, it's not about blindly accepting everything these texts say. It's about engaging with them critically, understanding, the historical and cultural context where they came from, right? And then asking ourselves, how might those values and principles translate or not translate to our world today?
So it's more about having like a dialogue with these texts than just taking them as like a set of rules. Right?
Exactly, yeah. It's about appreciating their historical and cultural significance, recognizing the values they're trying to uphold, and then having an open, honest conversation about how those values might be relevant or maybe need to be, I don't know, reinterpreted in our modern context.
Because let's be real, the world has changed a lot since these texts were, written. We have a much better understanding of things like consent, power dynamics, the long-term, psychological effects of different types of relationships.
Right. And those are all things we absolutely need to take into account when we're thinking about these issues.
Yeah.
It's not about throwing out the wisdom of the past. It's about integrating it with our current understanding of the world.
Okay, so we're not like throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
But we are, being critical and thoughtful about how we apply these, ancient ideas to our modern lives.
Precisely. It's about having an informed and nuanced perspective.
Yeah.
And it's about recognizing that even within these texts, there are different interpretations, different perspectives. The conversation about, morality and relationships, it's ongoing, right? And these ancient texts, they can be valuable contributors to that conversation, even if they don't, provide all the answers.
So where does that kind of leave us then? I mean, we've explored the Quran's stance against, incest, the Bible's, more layered approach with both prohibitions and examples. And we've touched on how those perspectives might, fit into the modern world. What stands out to you as the most significant takeaway from all of this?
For me, it's the realization that these conversations about relationships, about boundaries, about morality, they're timeless. What was once considered like absolute truth, might be seen differently now through the lens of modern understanding. And that's okay. It's through these ongoing dialogues informed by both, ancient wisdom and contemporary insights that we can continue to shape a more just and compassionate world.
I love that. It's not about clinging to the past. It's about using it to inform our present and our future. And that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive. But don't go anywhere. There's still more to come. In part 3, we'll be exploring some additional perspectives, and we'll leave you with, some final thoughts to ponder. Stay tuned. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into fornication and incest as seen through the Quran and the Bible. It's been quite a journey so far, exploring these ancient texts and really wrestling with some pretty heavy stuff, wouldn't you say?
It has been fascinating, hasn't it? We've uncovered some really thought-provoking stories, unpacked, some pretty complex moral dilemmas, and even considered how these ancient perspectives might, relate to our lives today.
Yeah, no doubt. We've definitely covered a lot of ground. But as we start to wrap things up here, I'm just curious, is there anything else from your research that really jumps out at you? Any like final insights or even lingering questions that you'd like to share with us?
What strikes me the most is that even though we're talking about texts that are, thousands of years old, right? They still have this incredible power to spark debate. To make us think critically about our own values, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's like these texts are still relevant, even if we don't necessarily agree with every single thing they say.
Exactly. And I think that's because, well, they tap into something really fundamental about being human, our need to define boundaries, to understand what's right and wrong, and to figure out how to live together in a way that's both just and compassionate.
Yeah, I was really struck by how both the Quran and the Bible, they emphasize the importance of family, Even though they approach it in different ways, they both seem to see the family unit as, like, the cornerstone of a healthy society.
Yes. And that's something that's still so relevant today, even as our understanding of family has become more diverse and inclusive. The question of how we create and maintain healthy, loving relationships within our families, however we define them, it's something that continues to challenge us and to inspire us.
And these ancient texts,
Yeah.
with all their complexities and contradictions, they can actually offer some pretty valuable insights into those challenges. It's almost like they're giving us a roadmap, not necessarily with all the answers, but with a set of questions that we can use to guide our own journeys.
It's like they're saying, look, here are some of the issues that people have been grappling with for centuries. How are you going to approach them in your own life?
So it's not about, blindly following rules. It's about using these texts as a kind of springboard for our own, moral and ethical reflections.
Exactly. It's about having an open mind, engaging with these texts critically, and allowing them to, to challenge and to enrich our understanding of the world.
And maybe that's the most important takeaway from this whole deep dive, that these conversations about morality, about relationships, about the meaning of family, they're never really finished. They're ongoing, evolving processes that require us to be thoughtful, to be compassionate, and willing to learn from both the past and the present.
It's about finding that balance between respecting tradition and embracing change, between, honoring the wisdom of the past and using it to build a better future.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time for us to surface from this deep dive. We've explored some pretty fascinating, challenging terrain, and I really hope our listeners have come away with a renewed appreciation for the enduring power of these ancient texts. What do you think?
It's been a real pleasure diving deep with you, and I hope our listeners they'll continue to explore these topics and engage in these important conversations.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the fascinating world of ideas. Until next time.
Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. I hope you've gained some valuable insights. If you're a truth seeker, yearning for divine light and ready to step out of darkness, now is your moment. The truth is that Allah is the one and only creator of the universe. He has sent over 124,000 messengers and prophets to guide humanity, starting with Adam and culminating with the final messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all. If you resonate with this message, you might be ready to embrace Islam. Simply recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. For further support, feel free to join our WhatsApp group. You can send us a private message there. The link is in the video description. Don't wait until it's too late. We look forward to connecting with you soon.